More than 14 centuries ago, in a land of sand and silence, a man stood among his people and spoke words that no one at that time could fully understand, words that seemed distant, almost impossible, yet carried a weight that would echo across generations until they reached us here today, in a world that looks nothing like the one he lived in, and yet somehow everything he described feels deeply familiar, because the one who spoke those words was not an ordinary man, he was Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the final messenger, and among the many things he brought to humanity were not only guidance and mercy, but also warnings, glimpses into a future that would unfold step by step until people would begin to witness those signs with their own eyes and feel a quiet realization growing inside them. And today, if you pause for a moment and truly reflect, you begin to notice something subtle yet undeniable, that time no longer feels the same, days pass faster than they should, weeks disappear before you can even hold on to them, and years slip away as if they were only moments. And this is not just a feeling, it is something that was spoken about long before our time, that the blessing in time would be reduced and people would feel life moving faster without understanding why. And you see it everywhere now, people rushing through their days, constantly busy yet strangely unfulfilled, always moving yet never truly arriving, because when time loses its blessing, movement increases but meaning decreases, and that is where the uneasiness begins, because a person starts to feel that something is missing even when everything seems present. And this was only one of the many signs, because he also spoke about a time when truth would become unclear and falsehood would spread so widely that people would struggle to tell the difference. And look around today, information is everywhere, voices are louder than ever, yet clarity feels harder to find, because not everything that shines is truth and not everything that is repeated is real. And in this noise people begin to lose direction, not because guidance disappeared, but because distractions became stronger than focus, and slowly without realizing it people begin to follow what is easy instead of what is right. And this shift does not happen suddenly, it happens quietly, step by step, until it becomes normal, until people no longer question it, and that is when the warning becomes reality, because the most dangerous changes are the ones that feel ordinary, the ones that blend into daily life until no one notices them anymore. And as the world continues to change, another sign begins to appear more clearly, that trust starts to fade, honesty becomes rare, and people begin to value appearance over truth, choosing what looks good over what is good. And this creates a world where people are seen but not known, heard but not understood, connected but not truly close. And in the middle of all of this, a person begins to feel something difficult to explain, a kind of emptiness that does not come from lack of things but from lack of meaning. And that emptiness grows when life becomes centered around everything except what truly matters, because when the center is lost, everything else begins to feel unstable. And this is where the deeper warning lies, not just in what happens around us but in what happens within us, because the signs are not only external, they are reflections of what is changing inside the hearts of people. And the more the world speeds up, the more people forget to slow down and reflect. The more they chase the next thing, the more they lose sight of what they already have. And this creates a cycle that never truly satisfies, because without a clear center, every direction begins to feel temporary, every goal begins to feel incomplete, and every achievement begins to feel empty after a short time. And that is why these words spoken so long ago still carry weight today, because they were not only describing events, they were guiding hearts, warning people not just about what will happen but about how to remain steady when it does. And as you think about it now, as you look at your own life, your own days, your own sense of time slipping away, a question begins to form quietly within you, not loudly and not suddenly but deeply. What am I really moving toward? What is at the center of my life? Because if everything around you is changing and moving faster, then the only thing that can keep you grounded is what you choose to revolve around. And if that center is not strong, then everything else will continue to feel uncertain no matter how much you gain. And this realization does not come all at once, it comes slowly, like a light growing in the distance. And the more you notice these signs, the more you begin to understand that they are not just meant to be observed, they are meant to be felt, they are meant to wake something inside you. Something that has been quiet for too long, something that reminds you that life is not just about moving forward but about moving in the right direction. And that direction begins with recognizing the signs not as coincidences but as reminders, reminders that were spoken long before we were here, reminders that are unfolding now, and reminders that are asking you one simple but powerful question: are you paying attention? As these realizations begin to settle quietly within the heart, something deeper starts to unfold, because the signs are not only around us, they are also within us. And among the most striking things that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, spoke about was not just how the world would change, but how people themselves would change, how priorities would shift in ways that would feel normal on the surface yet carry a deeper imbalance underneath. And one of those signs was the rapid spread of wealth, not as a blessing that brings gratitude but as a test that brings distraction. because there would come a time when money would become so widespread that people would struggle to find meaning beyond it, a time when what once was rare would become common, and what once was valued would become ignored, and today you can see it clearly, opportunities are greater than ever, access is easier than ever, yet satisfaction feels further away than ever because when wealth increases without purpose, it does not fill the heart, it only fills the hands, and the hands can never hold what the heart truly needs, and this is where the imbalance begins because people start measuring their worth by what they own instead of who they are, by what they display instead of what they carry within, and slowly without realizing it, the center shifts from meaning to appearance, from purpose to possession. And this shift creates a quiet emptiness that no amount of success can fully remove because success without direction becomes another form of distraction, another way of staying busy without being fulfilled, and along with this increase in wealth comes another sign that was once unimaginable, that people who were once simple and humble would begin to compete in building taller and taller structures, reaching higher into the sky not out of need, but out of pride, and at first this might seem like progress, like achievement, like something to admire, but when you look deeper you begin to see the pattern that the higher people build externally, the more disconnected they often become internally, because elevation in the physical world does not always reflect elevation in the spiritual one, and this competition creates a cycle where people are constantly trying to outdo one another, not to improve themselves, but to prove themselves, and in that pursuit something essential is lost, because life becomes a comparison instead of a journey, a race instead of a reflection, and as this continues, another change quietly takes place that people begin to chase recognition more than they chase truth, they begin to seek validation more than they seek understanding, and this is where the heart begins to feel unstable, because when your value depends on how others see you, it will always fluctuate, it will always feel uncertain, it will always leave you wanting more, and this is exactly what was warned about, not as a restriction but as a protection because a heart that is constantly chasing cannot find peace, and a life that is constantly comparing cannot find contentment. And when you look at the world today, you begin to notice how deeply this has taken root, how easily people are influenced by what they see, how quickly they adjust their lives to match expectations that were never truly their own, and in this process they slowly lose connection with what actually matters, because the more attention is placed outward, the less awareness remains inward, and this creates a life that looks full but feels empty, a life that appears successful but lacks depth, and this is where the warning becomes personal because it is no longer about what is happening in the world, it is about what is happening inside you, about what you are prioritizing, about what is shaping your decisions, about what is guiding your direction, and as you reflect on this, you begin to realize that the signs are not meant to create fear, they are meant to create awareness, they are meant to make you pause, to make you question, to make you realign before it becomes too late because the greatest loss is not losing wealth or status, it is losing direction without realizing it, it is moving forward without knowing where you are going, it is building a life that looks complete but feels disconnected. And that is why these words still carry so much weight because they are not only describing a future, they are guiding a present, they are asking you to look beyond what is visible and pay attention to what is meaningful, to recognize that not everything that grows is beneficial and not everything that shines is valuable, and as this understanding begins to settle within you, another question rises quietly but powerfully, not about the world but about yourself, what am I really chasing and more importantly why? Because once you begin to answer that honestly, everything else starts to become clearer, and that clarity is where change begins. And as this clarity begins to grow, something shifts from simply observing the signs to feeling their weight, because the deeper warnings were never only about what people would see, but about what they would become, and among those warnings was something that touches every part of life, something subtle yet powerful, that trust would begin to disappear, that honesty would become rare, and that people would no longer be valued for their truth but for their image, and when you look at the world today, you can feel this change without needing anyone to explain it because relationships have become fragile, words have become uncertain, and promises no longer carry the same weight they once did, and this does not happen suddenly, it happens slowly, through small compromises, through moments where truth is replaced with convenience, where honesty is sacrificed for comfort, until eventually it becomes normal, until people begin to expect less from one another and protect themselves more. Then they connect, and in that shift something essential is lost because trust is what holds people together, and when it weakens everything else begins to feel unstable, and along with this comes another sign that was spoken about, that knowledge would increase but understanding would decrease, that information would become widespread yet wisdom would become rare, and this is something we live with every single day, because answers are always within reach, yet clarity feels distant. People know more facts than ever before, yet struggle more than ever to find meaning, and this creates a strange contradiction, where the mind is full but the heart feels empty, where learning becomes a collection instead of a transformation. And in that space people begin to feel lost not because they lack access, but because they lack direction. And this is where the deeper danger lies, because when knowledge is not connected to purpose, it becomes noise, and noise does not guide, it only distracts. And the more distracted a person becomes, the easier it is to drift without realizing it. And as this continues, another change begins to take place, that people become more focused on what is immediate rather than what is lasting, choosing what feels good now over what is good in the long run. And this creates a life built on impulses instead of intention, on reaction instead of reflection. And over time this weakens the ability to pause, to think, to choose consciously, because everything becomes faster, more urgent, more consuming, and in that speed something important is left behind, the ability to truly feel, to truly reflect, to truly connect. And this is why so many people begin to feel overwhelmed without understanding why, because their lives are full but their hearts are tired, their days are busy but their minds are restless. And in the middle of all this another warning quietly reveals itself, that people will begin to follow trends more than truth, crowds more than conviction, and this creates a world where direction is no longer chosen but copied, where identity is no longer discovered but adopted. And in that process people lose something deeply personal, the ability to stand firm in what is right even when it is not popular, even when it is not easy. And this is where the real test begins, not in what you see around you but in how you respond to it, because the signs are not forcing you to change, they are revealing the environment in which you must choose, and that choice is what defines your path. And as you begin to see this more clearly, you realize that the warnings were never meant to make life feel heavy, they were meant to make your direction clear, to help you recognize what truly matters before everything else pulls you away from it. And in that realization something begins to settle within you, a quiet awareness that you cannot control the speed of the world. You cannot stop the changes around you, but you can choose what you center yourself on, you can choose what guides your decisions, you can choose what defines your path, and that choice becomes more important than anything else, because in a world filled with movement, the only thing that brings stability is a strong center, and without it even the strongest person can feel lost, and with it even the most uncertain path can become clear. And as this understanding deepens, one final question rises within you, not as a thought but as a realization. When everything around you is changing, what is it that you refuse to let go of? Because the answer to that question will shape everything that comes next. And as this question settles deeply within the heart, something begins to shift from reflection into realization, because at some point it is no longer enough to simply recognize the signs, there comes a moment when a person must decide what to do with that awareness. And this is where the final warnings carry their greatest weight, because Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did not only describe how the world would change, he showed how a person should remain steady within it. And among those final signs was something that touches every generation, that trials would increase, that confusion would spread, and that people would find themselves surrounded by distractions that pull them away from what truly matters, not in obvious ways, but in subtle ones, in ways that feel harmless at first, in ways that slowly take up time, attention, and focus until a person wakes up one day feeling distant from who they were meant to be. And this is the reality many people live in today. A constant stream of noise, endless choices, endless opinions, endless demands, and in the middle of all of it a heart that is trying to hold on to something real, something stable, something true, and yet finds it difficult because everything around it is moving so quickly. And this is where the deeper understanding begins, because the problem was never the existence of change, the problem is losing your center within that change, because when the center is lost everything begins to feel overwhelming, every decision becomes uncertain, every path feels unclear. And this is why so many people feel lost even when they seem to have everything, because without a clear direction, having more does not bring clarity, it only brings more to manage, more to think about, more to carry, and eventually that weight becomes exhausting. And this is where the warning turns into guidance, because in the middle of all this movement there is a simple truth that remains unchanged, that a heart connected to what is constant will not be shaken by what is temporary, and that connection is not built in moments of ease, it is built in moments of awareness, in moments where a person chooses to pause instead of rushing, to reflect instead of reacting, to realign instead of drifting. And these choices may seem small, but they shape everything. Because direction is not determined by one big decision, it is determined by the small choices made consistently over time. And this is what separates those who feel lost from those who remain grounded, not the absence of challenges, but the presence of a clear center. And as you begin to understand this, something becomes clear, that the signs you see around you are not random, they are reminders. Reminders that life is not about keeping up with everything, it is about holding on to what matters most, and that requires intention, it requires awareness, it requires the willingness to step back and ask yourself whether the direction you are moving in is truly aligned with what you believe, because without that alignment it is easy to be carried by the current of the world, to move without thinking, to follow without questioning, and to wake up one day realizing that you have traveled far without ever choosing your path. And this realization can feel heavy, but it is also an opportunity, because as long as you are aware, you are able to change, you are able to realign, you are able to return to what truly matters, and this is where hope begins, not in changing the world around you, but in strengthening what is within you, because when the inside is steady, the outside loses its power to shake you, and this is what the warnings were always pointing toward: not fear but awareness, not despair but direction, not confusion but clarity. And as you sit with this understanding, as you reflect on everything you have seen and everything you have felt, one final realization begins to form, that the purpose of recognizing the signs is not to simply acknowledge them, but to respond to them, to let them guide you back to a center that does not change, a center that remains firm no matter how much the world shifts around it. And when that center is found, something inside you becomes still, not because life becomes easier, but because your direction becomes clear, and that clarity is what carries you forward even when everything else feels uncertain. And when that clarity finally settles within you, something quiet yet powerful begins to take shape, because this journey was never only about recognizing the signs or understanding the warnings, it was always leading to this moment, a moment where everything you have seen, everything you have felt, and everything you have reflected on comes together into one simple truth, that a life without a clear center will always feel unstable no matter how much it grows, and a heart without direction will always feel empty no matter how much it gains. And this is where the final meaning reveals itself, because the words spoken so long ago were not meant to remain as distant reminders, they were meant to become personal, to become real within your own life, to guide the way you think, the way you choose, and the way you live. And when you look back at all the signs, the passing of time, the spread of distractions, the increase of wealth, the loss of trust, the confusion between truth and falsehood, you begin to see that they all point to one thing: not just what is happening in the world, but what is happening inside the human heart, because the external world only reflects the internal state, and when the inside becomes scattered, the outside begins to feel overwhelming, but when the inside becomes centered, even chaos begins to lose its weight. And this is the realization that changes everything, because it shifts your focus from trying to control what you cannot control to strengthening what you can, your intention, your awareness, your connection to what truly matters. And this is where the real transformation begins, not in a sudden moment but in a quiet decision, a decision to stop drifting and start choosing, to stop reacting and start reflecting, to stop chasing everything and start holding on to what is real. And this decision may not be visible to others, but it will be felt within you, because it brings a kind of stability that does not depend on circumstances, a kind of peace that does not disappear when things become difficult, and a kind of clarity that continues to guide you even when the path is uncertain. And as you hold on to this, as you begin to realign your life around a center that does not change, something else becomes clear, that the purpose was never perfection, it was direction. It was not about never falling but about always returning, because no matter how far a person drifts, there is always a way back, always a moment where awareness can turn into action. And that moment is now, not in the past and not in the future, but right here where you are, with what you know and what you choose to do with it. And as you sit with this understanding, as you feel the weight of these reminders and the clarity they bring, one final truth settles deeply within you, that the signs are not something to fear, they are something to respond to. They are an invitation to return to what truly matters, to center your life around what does not change, to build a direction that remains steady even when everything else shifts. And when you accept that invitation, when you choose that center, everything begins to align in a way that feels different, not because the world has changed but because you have. And in that change there is something powerful, something lasting, something real, because you are no longer moving without purpose. You are no longer chasing without direction. You are no longer searching without understanding. You are moving with intention, with awareness, and with a heart that knows where it belongs, and that is where everything finally begins to make sense.